Hello there and welcome to another edition of Ask David. Plenty of questions still coming in. We're right in the middle of the summer growing season now. The heat, the sun, they're all causing problems with your growing conditions, but there are plenty of pests and diseases rearing their ugly heads too. So let's get on and answer some of your questions. First off this week, Sarah has written in about her solanum glasnevum. Now this is the purple potato vine. It's really a scrambling shrub. It's not really a climber as such. It's a scrambling shrub that you can train against a wall or a fence, normally smothered in flowers, potato-like flowers, right the way through the summer months, and it's an absolute must-have for a sunny position. Now Sarah says that her solanum has actually stopped flowering and it's produced little berries, which are the seed pods, and she's wondering why it's finished flowering so early, and she's wondering if there's anything she can do about it. So Sarah, here it's been the warm winter and also the hot spring growing conditions that we've been experiencing. The plant has actually probably exhausted itself by producing lots of really early flowers on those very early strong shoots that it made back in the spring. And then it will go into this cycle of having flowered to produce seed. So what I would recommend is cutting all the side branches on the solanum back by around about half to encourage some buds to come from low down so that it reshoots and you get another flush of flowers. Next, Bryan asks, what's the Chelsea chop and is it too late to do it now? We're approaching the end of June now. So Bryan, the Chelsea chop involves cutting back herbaceous perennials, late flowering herbaceous perennials, by about half to a third of their height to encourage a lower, later flush of shoots that will carry later flowers. You can do it in a number of different ways. You can either cut back the whole plant by around half to a third, and the whole thing will then reshoot from lower down, producing stronger supportive shoots that will carry later flowers, probably around 4 to 6 weeks later than they would normally. Or you can do it selectively to different parts of the same clump of plant. So if you've got a rudbeckia, for example, you could cut back half of the shoots on the rudbeckia by around half to a third of their height, and then you'll get the early flowers from the full length shoots, and then the ones you cut back will then flower 4 to 6 weeks later. You could also try it in a big grouping of the same plant. So say where you've got 7 or 9 of the same plant, you could do it to alternate plants, cutting some back, leaving some to carry on growing, so that some of them will flower early and then some will flower later. It's a technique that really takes its name from the timing that you would do it. So it's called the Chelsea chop because generally speaking it's done around about Chelsea flower show time, so around about the end of May. We're now about a month later than the end of the Chelsea flower show, so to be honest I think it's a bit late. Also add in the fact that we've got a very early growing season, and I would leave well alone, Bryan, for this year. But certainly next year it's worth giving the Chelsea chop a go. Now Diana has emailed in with a question about carrots. She says that she's trying to grow them in nice big deep pots filled with multi-purpose compost mix. In previous years she's done this, and last year she got quite small carrots. This year the seedlings are quite scrawny, and she's wondering whether there's a different method she can use and whether she's going wrong in any way. So Diana, I would be inclined to fill those pots with either my garden soil, if it's good enough, or with bagged loam that you can buy from a nursery or a DIY store or a garden centre, and mix that soil or that loam in the proportion of 4 parts by volume of soil or loam with 1 part of coarse, gritty horticultural sand. Mix it all together thoroughly, fill your pots with that, tamp it just to make it solid and consolidate that soil mixture, and then sow your seeds in drills into the top of that, and I think that way you'll get carrots to be proud of. Russ has sent in a picture of his yew bushes. He's got 3 of them. They were planted last year and you can see from this picture that they've gone very yellow and started to become bleached. Russ says that he's been keeping them well watered, but he wonders if there's what's gone wrong and whether there's anything that he can do to redeem and save the plants. Well, Russ, this looks like drought damage to me, definitely, and even though you've watered them, I think what's happened is that those quite large plants sat in the soil over the winter, and it was a very wet winter, and I think probably some of those roots then died off or rotted off in the wet soil. And then if you think about it, at the beginning of our lockdown period, it suddenly turned very hot and very dry. And I think if a large proportion of those roots had died over the winter, they haven't had the chance to regrow and reform as they would do in a regular spring. So this plant is struggling to keep that top growth going with very little root system. So my advice would be to cut the plants back by about half their height, cut off all the yellow and the bleached growth to start with, cut back hard, and you'll find that yew will regrow very strongly from low down on the plant and the plants will recover. In the meantime, mulch around the base of the plants. Keep them moist, but you don't need to water them every day, perhaps a couple of times a week during dry weather, and those yews will romp away. And last this week, Jordan is making a start on growing some veg. Well done, Jordan. He's filling some raised beds with some growing medium, wants to know what to use, not digging up the lawn. He's leaving the lawn intact and then building the raised beds on top of there, and simply wants to know what to use to fill those raised beds with. So the thing I would do before you fill them is to spike that lawn area first. I'm not suggesting you dig it up by any means, but certainly spike through that lawn area just to break up any real compaction and to allow water, if there's an excess of water, particularly in the winter, allow that excess to drain away by spiking the lawn to start with, because otherwise you'll keep that compaction in the ground for a long time. And then I would simply try and get hold of your own garden soil, or if you can't get hold of that, get a huge bale full of loam. You can buy it in meter cubed dump bags. Get a good quality loam, not a compost. A loam is a good quality soil. Fill the raised beds with that, and then perhaps just top off the top 10 centimetres or so with some multi-purpose or some good quality compost, homemade garden compost. Fork that into the top surface of the loam and you're ready to start. So keep your questions coming in, plenty more questions I'm sure to come over the rest of the summer. I hope I've answered some of the most pressing questions this week, and I look forward to joining you again next week for more Ask David.